Hello. Today I want to talk about what is archaeology. It's a relatively short PowerPoint that I have for you. Here you can see a map of the part of the area in question. Here is the Gulf of Suez, and this is the Gulf of Aqaba, or the Israelis call it the Gulf of Eilat. This is the delta of the Nile River. Here's the Nile. The Mediterranean, this is the Dead Sea, and of course modern day Israel or Palestine. Mount Sinai is traditionally located right about here, and I've been able to visit there. It's very rugged, very remote area. Well, this is where the world of archaeology takes place, and there are several definitions of archaeology. Um, I call Indiana Jones the patron saint of archaeologists because his movies, three, I guess now four movies, have really made a lot of people, at least in the past, very interested in archaeology and gotten them involved in it. Archaeology itself means ancient things, the study of ancient things, or sometimes we might call it the study of antiquities. There are many definitions: scientific study of remains of the past, study of durable rubbish, systematic recovery, analysis, and interpretation of the evidence of human activity. I think that's a pretty good one. Archaeology is not an exact science, and it can go hand in hand with the study of history, the study of biblical studies, as well as classics and other fields. But science itself should be repeatable. Natural science, physical science, biology, chemistry, these sorts of things you can repeat. However, archaeology is not repeatable in that once you dig a square, like you see here, once this square is excavated, it cannot be re-excavated. So in that sense, it is not a exact science. We can dig the square next to it, but I guarantee you it won't be the same as the square we see here. How do we go about doing archaeology? You have to locate a site. Some people ask us, how do we know where to excavate? That can be a complicated question. Depends on what you're looking for, and depends on the period and the place. But in the Middle East, of course, we do have place names. A lot of the place names are in Arabic, but the Arabic place name often preserves the name that it was, say, in the Hebrew Bible. And so that can be a clue for us. There are other geographic clues. There are surface survey. This is where many archaeologists have gone from site to site, and they have recorded what they see on the surface: building stones, pottery, other remains. Once you determine where you want to excavate, or where you think might be a good place to excavate, you have to do some survey work. This survey work involves surveying as you might do for a construction site, where you use a level, a transit. You have to make a map of the site. That's a good way to start. And then you lay out a grid. This grid is sort of like the game Battleship, where you have A9, B6, all those sorts of grid network. When you're firing at your opponent, it goes through the grid. And this is what we do: is we set up a grid. Ideally, you would map the whole site, and you would grid the entire site. Even if you never get around to excavating all those squares, which you probably won't, they will all be labeled with many times the alphabetic part of it perhaps being vertical north to south, and the numeric being horizontal west to east. But there are different systems. Sometimes people start in the center of the site and do it that way. But at any rate, you would need a system to do a systematic excavation of the site. Here is another way we can identify sites and places to excavate. This is a place I know very well. This is a Bila of the Decapolis. This is in fact an aerial photo of the site itself. If you see here, just this aerial photo was actually taken, I think probably shortly after World War II, maybe in the late 40s, early 50s of the last century. But a nice photo it is. It shows us the wadi. This is the wadi or the valley. There's a stream, a spring up here which forms a stream, and it flows all the way up to Syria up in the north. Abila is part of the Decapolis area, and it's right near the border of the Golan Heights and of Syria to the north. Well, I worked here for many seasons. If you see this hill here, which looks rather regular in its shape, anytime you see regular lines like this that are sort of angular, perpendicular, like you see here, these are evidence of human activity, man-made. In other words, these are wall lines here of external walls. This, I can tell you, is the outline of a Byzantine church, which may have earlier been a Roman temple. And you can see more lines over here. Down here, you can see a curve. This is not a natural curve. This had to be man-made. Some debate about what this is, but I believe it was a Roman theater at one time. And down in this area, a bath was located. This is a bridge with a Roman road. A lot more things I could talk about here, but you can see from this that if you said, well, we're going to look at this site, we know there's a lot of ruins here. If you took a look at the aerial photos, you did some surface survey, it would help you identify where you might want to excavate. And I can tell you we've excavated here, and here, and here, and here, and in fact, here, and several of the tombs. There are a lot of tombs along here. We've been excavating here for a long time. Well, what kind of stuff do we find? We find occupational debris. That's basically a nice term for junk or garbage that people have left behind, things that they have dropped, things they have thrown away, things that have broken. So occupational debris could be a lot of different things, and I list a bunch that are here. Everything from wall lines, buildings, inscriptions, broken pieces of pottery, and pieces of bone like you see in the picture here in the hands that we have here. So a lot of different things it could be, but basically occupational debris is just evidence that somebody once lived there. Now, how do we date the finds? How do we date the finds? There are two main systems. One is an absolute dating, and that's what we normally tend to use in our everyday life. We say it's 2014, for example. We give the exact day, the exact year. So we want to know something happened. We say it happened on this date in 1973 on February the 20th or something. That would be an absolute date. It was very hard to find. I mean, it's basically impossible to find it from archaeology because things are simply not dated unless there is an inscription which gives you the precise date. And usually the inscriptions, sometimes they have dates, sometimes there's some debate over what that date is. But at any rate, that is absolute dating. More common is relative dating. You know what relative dating is. That's when you take your cousin to the prom. That's relative dating, right? No, that's not what we're talking about. Relative dating here is where we date things in relationship or how they are related to one another. So this was found above where we found this, so we say this is later than this. Okay, that's stratigraphy. We can also use radiocarbon dating, which will give us a range of dates, and most often, especially in the Middle East, we use ceramic typology. That's the shape and the size of pottery, which changes over time, and pottery is basically indestructible. You can drop it and break it, but you can't really destroy it. It's going to stay pretty close to where somebody dropped it for a very, very long time. And they did not do in ancient times what we tend to do in modern times. In modern times, we have a construction site, a building, something happens to a building. First thing we do is we haul everything away. We get a garbage truck, we get a bulldozer, and we haul everything away so the site is clear. But in ancient times, they maintained these things, and they used them and reused materials. So that's how we date the finds. Okay. So this is just a little introduction to archaeology and some of the stuff with ceramic typology as well. Ceramic typology means that the pottery changes with time. When you have pottery, you're dealing really with a couple of things. You need a container. For example, you're going to eat your Cheerios. Well, it's nice to have a bowl to put them in, so you can put the milk on it or whatever else. And you want it wide and open so that you can get the material in and get the material out nicely. That's good for soup, stew, things like cereal, things like that. So that's an open vessel. It's open because it's you want to get into it easily and get things out of it easily. If it's storage, it's going to be closed. So you're going to have a more narrow opening that you would put things in. It's not that easy to get them in and out, but you don't care because you're storing them for a longer period of time. Or perhaps you're cooking. If you're cooking, you tend to want to have it more closed as well, like a cook pot, so that you can keep the heat in and keep the material in so it doesn't boil over, things like that. But the thing is that the shape of the ceramic piece will be based upon its function. What are you going to use it to do? Are we going to use this to cook stew? Are we going to use this to eat out of, to drink out of, to store things in? Those are very different activities, and we can shape the clay. That's the nice thing about ceramics, clay. You make it into almost any shape, and so you make the shape to fit the function. So the form is related to the function. But another big part of ceramics is that, like fashion, it changes with time. So if I were to give you a tail light of a 1957 Chevy, and some of you may know what a 1957 Chevy tail light looks like. If I just gave you a piece of the tail light and you had studied 1957 Chevys, their tail lights and so forth, I could give you just a piece of the tail light and you could probably tell me this is from a 1957 Chevy, and from that you could perhaps sketch out what the Chevy looked like. There might be evidence of what color it was, or maybe other peculiarities about it, how much you knew about it. Same way with the pottery. We can take just a small piece of pottery, and that small piece of pottery then can give us clues as to what the whole vessel looked like. Okay, so this is something to keep in mind. This is why ceramic typology and using the pottery is so crucial for us to dating the layers or the strata of a site. And that's what you need to keep in mind, because the site is much like a layer cake. And as you cut down through the layer cake vertically, you're going to see the icing, you're going to see the cake, you're going to see more icing, more cake, depending on how many layers it is. You take a wedge out of it, you slice down through it, you'll be able to tell without looking at the entire cake how the cake is, how it was made, how it was constructed, so to speak. And what you could anticipate would be if you took another slice out of it, because you've already taken one. This is what we do with a site. When we excavate, a lot of times we do a vertical excavation. This gives us an idea of the different layers of the site and their occupation. How do we date that occupation? We use primarily ceramic material. The ceramic material, we really need to use diagnostic pieces. These are rims, bases, perhaps handles, or any special decorations. Okay, so this is how we do it. And we do what we call pottery reading. Pottery reading is where we have a big table, basically. We've washed, we've cleaned, we've dried the pottery, and we dump it out from the particular square where it came, and we read it. That is, we look at it and read it. Well, I think that's enough for now, but I hope this is helpful to you. All right, bye.